January 1991. Iraq, a nation carved from the chaos of colonial borders, trembled under the iron fist of Saddam Hussein. For over a decade, the dictator had ruled with an unyielding grip. His reign defined by terror, cunning, and a relentless pursuit of power. Those who opposed him vanished overnight, their families left with whispers, fear, and unanswered questions. The country's streets were lined with the symbols of his regime banners, proclaiming loyalty. Secret police, lurking behind every corner, and the ever-present fear that even a casual word could be your last. Despite the oppressive domestic climate, Saddam had ambitions that reached far beyond his borders. He was not content merely to control Iraq. He hungered for regional dominance. The Persian Gulf, a strategic artery of oil and wealth, became the focal point of his vision. By the summer of 1990, the world was about to witness the manifestation of that ambition. Iraq's military, the fourth largest on the planet, was formidable on paper. Hundreds of thousands of troops, thousands of tanks, armored personnel carriers, and an array of aircraft, some modern, some relics of Soviet ingenuity, stood at Saddam's command. Yet, for all the numbers, the effectiveness of this military hinged on the unwavering loyalty of men who often obeyed orders out of fear as much as duty. This was a force trained to strike fast, to overwhelm, and to crush resistance before it could even form. On August 2, 1990, Saddam Hussein ordered his tanks to roll across the border into Kuwait. The invasion was swift, surgical, and shocking in its efficiency. Kuwait's modest military, numbering only in the tens of thousands, faced a juggernaut it could not hope to withstand. Within hours, the capital city was overrun, oil fields threatened, and the tiny nation's sovereignty extinguished almost overnight. The world reacted with alarm. Diplomatic channels flared with urgent calls, warnings, and ultimatums. But Saddam, emboldened by both arrogance and the memory of past successes, refused to halt his campaign. Negotiations faltered, and it became clear that the only language Saddam understood was force. By the end of August, a coalition of nations had begun to coalesce, a global alignment unprecedented in the post-Cold War era. 28 countries, spanning 5 continents, committed forces to confront Iraq. From the sands of the Middle East to the capitals of Europe, governments and militaries coordinated, standing shoulder to shoulder against Saddam's aggression. Even as diplomats argued and generals planned, life within Iraq remained tense and surreal. Ordinary citizens navigated a society teetering between fear and obedience, while military installations hummed with preparations that no one outside Baghdad fully understood. The regime projected calm, but internally, cracks began to appear. Pilots trained on aging aircraft, soldiers ordered to prepare for possible conflict. They knew something massive was coming, but the full scope remained shrouded in secrecy. For Saddam, the invasion of Kuwait was more than a military maneuver. It was a statement, a challenge to the international order, and a gamble that the world's response would be delayed, hesitant, or ineffective. He underestimated the speed, precision, and determination of the coalition that was gathering on his doorstep. What he did not foresee was how swiftly the balance of power could shift, how quickly air supremacy could be contested, and how even his most advanced tools of war could be rendered vulnerable by strategy, courage, and a touch of luck. In this tense prelude, Iraq stood as both aggressor and unknowingly the stage for a battle that would highlight the unpredictable nature of aerial warfare. Beneath the desert skies, the mechanisms of war quietly churned. Pilots prepared their aircraft, and commanders calculated their moves. Every decision, every misstep, could ripple across the battlefield, reshaping the course of events in ways even the most meticulous plans could not anticipate. And amid this atmosphere of oppression, ambition, and looming confrontation, a small, almost forgotten fragment of Iraq's Air Force would prepare to make history in ways that few, outside the region, would ever know. 2 pilots, flying Soviet-era MiG-25s, would soon step into the most dangerous skies of their careers. Against the backdrop of political tension, technological imbalance, and sheer human bravery, they were about to confront a foe that epitomized modern air power, the F-15 Eagle. What follows is a story of audacity, desperation, and the extraordinary stakes of a hidden battle. It is a story that the headlines never told, a moment when strategy, courage, and timing collided high above the sands of Iraq. Before the explosions, before the missiles streaked across the sky, the stage was meticulously set. And from this quiet, tense beginning, the drama of the Iraqi ambush America never talks about would unfold. August 2, 1990. The sun rose over Kuwait City as Iraqi tanks thundered across the border, their engines rattling the fragile nerves of a nation unprepared for the scale of what was coming. Soldiers in the Kuwaiti army, young and trained for defense rather than full-scale invasion, scrambled to organize. Yet within hours, it became painfully clear. Their defenses were no match for Saddam Hussein's mechanized juggernaut. Armored columns moved with brutal efficiency, cutting through checkpoints, flattening resistance, and seizing key infrastructure. By the end of the day, Kuwait's skyline, once a symbol of oil wealth and regional prominence, was under occupation. The world watched in stunned silence. News outlets relayed images of tanks rolling down streets, soldiers fleeing, and government buildings overtaken. The invasion was not just a military action, it was a message. A bold assertion of power from a dictator who believed that fear and speed could silence global response. Diplomats scrambled to make sense of the sudden upheaval. The United Nations issued condemnations, but words alone could not roll back the steel tracks of Iraqi armor. Oil prices spiked overnight. Economies around the globe trembled at the prospect of Saddam controlling nearly a fifth of the world's proven oil reserves. Western capitals Washington, London, Paris convened in crisis mode. Intelligence reports painted a chilling picture. Saddam's army was vast, well-equipped, and unflinching in its orders. For the United States and its allies, the question shifted from could he be stopped to how, and at what cost. Meanwhile, across the Gulf, coalition forces began assembling. Soldiers from Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Arab League mobilized in a display of international unity rare in the modern era. Desert bases swelled with troops, tanks, artillery, and aircraft. Commanders studied the map of Kuwait and southern Iraq, plotting strategies that combined precision, overwhelming firepower, and coordination across land, sea, and air. Every decision mattered. A single miscalculation could cost thousands of lives and compromise the fragile cohesion of the coalition. In Baghdad, Saddam Hussein watched these preparations with a mixture of defiance and calculation. His generals briefed him on troop movements, reconnaissance reports, and potential coalition responses. Yet the dictator exuded confidence. Some would call it hubris. For Saddam, the world was a chessboard, and Kuwait was but one piece. He underestimated not just the speed of the coalition's reaction, but the level of coordination and technological edge they would bring to the battlefield. For ordinary Iraqis, the invasion brought mixed reactions. Some celebrated with nationalist fervor, swept up in propaganda that framed Kuwait as a rightful part of Iraq. Others whispered fearfully about the consequences of challenging a global coalition. Families watched the skies nervously, aware that war was no longer a distant possibility but an impending reality. As the coalition tightened its grip, aerial reconnaissance revealed Iraq's vulnerabilities. Command centers, radar stations, and air defense positions were mapped with surgical precision. Planners in Riyadh, Washington, and London began envisioning the first phase of the response. Airstrikes aimed at dismantling Saddam's ability to wage war, before his tanks could press further into the region. It was a high-stakes game of timing, technology, and tactical foresight. By late August, it was clear. Diplomacy had failed. The world had drawn a line, and Saddam had crossed it. The buildup of coalition forces was no longer a show of strength. It was a declaration of inevitability. From the deserts of Saudi Arabia to the decks of aircraft carriers in the Gulf, soldiers, pilots, and support crews prepared for a conflict that would be fought with precision bombs, missiles, and an unprecedented display of air power. In the skies above Iraq and Kuwait, a silent tension mounted. Coalition jets leaked fast, and deadly awaited orders to strike, while Iraqi pilots, many flying aging Soviet aircraft, braced for a confrontation they could neither fully anticipate nor avoid. Ground crews fueled the engines, calibrated radar systems, and ran through checklists that would decide life or death in mere seconds. The stage was set for a conflict that would reshape the Gulf, challenge assumptions about modern warfare, and reveal a hidden, almost forgotten chapter of aerial combat. The invasion of Kuwait did more than redraw maps. It exposed the fragility of assumptions, the speed with which aggression could destabilize a region, and the necessity of coordinated response in an era of rapid military technology. Yet, beneath the headlines, beyond the diplomatic statements, a smaller, extraordinary story was quietly unfolding, one that would involve daring maneuvers, the audacity of pilots, and the limits of human courage under fire. As nations reacted and forces amassed, the world had no idea that in the skies above eastern Baghdad, 2 MiG-25 pilots were about to execute a sequence of events that would confound expectations, challenge technological supremacy, and mark a moment in history largely ignored by public record. The invasion was just the beginning. The real story, hidden in the skies, was only about to begin. As August unfolded, the world's response to Iraq's aggression began to take shape in the deserts and skies of the Gulf. Coalition forces, a mosaic of 28 nations, converged on the region. Their arrival, a spectacle of coordination and logistical precision unseen since the Second World War. Soldiers from Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Arab League moved into position, each contingent bringing its own expertise, doctrine, and technology. Together, they formed an international armada determined to halt Saddam Hussein's advance. The assembly of the coalition was as much a diplomatic triumph as it was a military one. Leaders in Washington, London, Paris, and Riyadh worked feverishly to bridge cultural differences, coordinate supply lines, and establish a unified chain of command. Communication networks buzzed with encrypted messages, satellite data, and aerial reconnaissance reports, ensuring that every maneuver was calculated with surgical accuracy. The coalition's air power, in particular, would become the decisive instrument in the upcoming confrontation, capable of projecting force across the desert with unmatched speed and precision. On the ground, the coalition built sprawling bases in Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states. Troops set up defensive positions, armored columns roamed the outskirts, and artillery units dug in, ready to strike at a moment's notice. Pilots and ground crews prepared aircraft, running checks on everything from avionics to weapon systems, knowing that any malfunction in the coming conflict could be fatal. The sense of anticipation was palpable, a mixture of tension, determination, and cautious optimism. Saddam, meanwhile, remained defiant in Baghdad. He believed that the coalition, a patchwork of nations with varying levels of experience and motivation, would falter when confronted with the realities of desert warfare. His intelligence suggested that internal disagreements, slow mobilization, and logistical challenges would slow the response. Yet, he underestimated the efficiency and coordination of a multinational force united by a common goal to restore Kuwait's sovereignty and deter further aggression. The coalition strategy hinged on air supremacy. Commanders understood that controlling the skies would render Iraq's tanks and artillery vulnerable and disorganized. Advanced aircraft, including F-15 Eagles and F-16 Fighting Falcons, were deployed in overwhelming numbers to ensure the destruction of Iraqi air defenses and to establish a buffer for ground forces. Every strike, every patrol, every reconnaissance mission was designed to dismantle Saddam's military machine with minimal risk to coalition troops. Even as the coalition solidified its presence, the human element remained critical. Soldiers, sailors, and airmen from diverse nations trained together, sharing tactics, language, and procedures. Pilots studied maps of the desert terrain, familiarized themselves with enemy positions, and rehearsed engagement protocols. Intelligence officers pored over satellite imagery and intercepted communications, searching for vulnerabilities in Iraq's defenses. It was a delicate balance between overwhelming force and precise execution, a dance of logistics and strategy that would test the limits of modern warfare. Within Iraq, the Air Force watched the coalition build up with a mixture of apprehension and defiance. Pilots trained on aging MiG-25s and MiG-20, aware that the skies would soon be a deadly arena where speed, skill, and luck would determine survival. Ground crews worked tirelessly to maintain aircraft that were often decades old, knowing that the technological edge lay firmly with their adversaries. For the men of Iraq's Air Force, every mission would be a gamble, one that could either etch their names into history or consign them to obscurity. By late August, the coalition's presence was undeniable. Tens of thousands of troops, hundreds of tanks, and scores of aircraft filled the deserts and airfields, a show of strength and readiness that Saddam could not ignore. The world watched, bracing for the inevitable clash. Diplomats continued their negotiations, but it was clear that the conflict would be decided not in conference rooms, but in the skies above Kuwait and southern Iraq. Amid this sprawling assembly, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test not just technology, but strategy, nerve, and ingenuity. Coalition planners understood that even a minor miscalculation could result in disaster. Iraqi commanders, emboldened by previous successes and desperate to salvage honor, prepared for resistance that would push both sides to the limits of human capability. Unseen by the public, hidden in the shadows of this international drama, a few Iraqi pilots and their MiG-25 Foxbats began preparing for what would become one of the most audacious and overlooked aerial engagements of the Gulf War against the overwhelming might of coalition air power. These pilots would attempt the near impossible, to challenge the very apex of modern fighter technology, exploiting every weakness, every opportunity, and every moment of human error. In the vast, unforgiving desert, the coalition's strength was evident. Yet even amidst this overwhelming force, the seeds of unpredictability had already been sown. Small, calculated actions, performed by a few determined men, had the potential to ripple through the theater of war, creating moments of drama and suspense that the world would largely never know. The battle for air supremacy was about to begin, and the players were already moving into position. The night sky over Iraq darkened with the ominous roar of jet engines. It was January 16, 1991, though many outside the desert would later remember the date vaguely. The events of that night marked a turning point in modern warfare. Hundreds of coalition aircraft streaked across the heavens, their mission clear: dismantle Iraq's military capabilities before ground forces ever advanced. It was a display of coordination, technology, and lethal precision, the likes of which the world had not seen since the Second World War. The first targets were Iraq's communications hubs. Satellites and reconnaissance planes had mapped them in painstaking detail. These installations were the lifelines of Saddam's air force, the nodes through which orders, radar guidance, and coordination flowed. As coalition bombs and missiles hit, lights went out across Baghdad and other key cities. Control towers, radar stations, and command centers were rendered silent. For Iraqi pilots, many of whom relied heavily on ground guidance to navigate and target, the world suddenly became a void. The instruments they trusted most were either destroyed or jammed, leaving them to rely solely on their own eyes and instincts. Chaos swept through Iraqi air bases. Dozens of aircraft, some still on the tarmac, were destroyed before they could take off. Others launched into the night only to find themselves isolated, navigating blind over unfamiliar terrain. MiG-20, the pride of Iraq's fleet and once a source of genuine concern for coalition planners, struggled to adapt to the confusion. Dogfights, if they occurred at all, were fleeting and deadly. One by one, pilots were shot down or forced to land, their planes lost forever. Yet amidst the devastation, there were moments that confounded expectations. A few of Iraq's older MiG-25 Foxbats designed in the 1960s and thought nearly obsolete against the likes of F-15s demonstrated unexpected effectiveness. In one incident, a Foxbat intercepted radar jamming aircraft, forcing them to flee and inadvertently exposing a nearby F-152 surface-to-air missiles. Another engagement saw two MiG-25s challenge for F-15s, slipping away after the Eagles fired multiple missiles. For Saddam, it was a brief, almost surreal glimmer of hope amid the collapse of his air force. The coalition's response to these anomalies was swift. Aerial patrols were established along the Iranian border to prevent Iraqi jets from fleeing the country. F-15s patrolled in pairs, cycling between high-speed intercepts and mid-air refueling, forming a virtual wall designed to trap Saddam's remaining aircraft within Iraq. Yet even this seemingly impenetrable barrier could not fully account for the audacity and skill of the few pilots willing to test it. On January 26, a remarkable movement began. Iraqi jets, desperate to survive, began streaking across the desert at low altitudes to avoid coalition radar. 23 jets made the crossing into Iran in a single day, followed by dozens more over the next few days. Some were destroyed, but many slipped through, shocking coalition commanders and baffling the press. For the pilots, each flight was a dangerous gamble one. Miscalculation could mean death or capture, but the potential reward was survival. This sequence of events demonstrated a key principle of modern warfare. Even overwhelming technological superiority could not guarantee absolute control. Speed, audacity, and intimate knowledge of local terrain could level the playing field, if only briefly. Coalition forces remained dominant, but the Iraqi pilots' desperate maneuvers revealed the cracks in what appeared to be an unstoppable juggernaut. Inside Iraq, morale was fragile. While ground forces braced for the inevitable coalition advance, airmen grappled with the loss of comrades, destroyed aircraft, and the looming impossibility of winning in open combat. Yet human resilience persisted. Pilots like Captain Mahmoud Awad and Captain Mohammed As-Samurai would soon seize the opportunity to turn desperation into daring, leveraging their MiG-25's raw speed to confront the seemingly invincible F-15s. The opening night of the coalition air campaign was not just a demonstration of technological might, it was a psychological assault. Radar screens flickered with incoming threats. Alarms blared across command centers, and the quiet confidence of Iraq's air force gave way to uncertainty and fear. For the world, it was an impressive display of air dominance. For the Iraqis, it was a wake-up call. The war was no longer a theoretical threat, it was airborne, inevitable, and merciless. And amid the chaos, the seeds of an extraordinary, largely untold story were being sown. Two MiG-25s, once considered relics of Soviet engineering, would soon engage the best fighter aircraft in the world in a confrontation that would challenge assumptions, test nerves, and remind the military world that even in the age of overwhelming air superiority, human courage and ingenuity could create moments of improbable drama. The skies were alive with tension, radar blips, and the quiet hum of engines preparing to unleash destruction. For Saddam, for coalition commanders, and for the pilots themselves, every second counted. What began as a meticulously calculated campaign of airstrikes was evolving into a theater of unpredictability, where luck, skill, and split-second decisions could shift the balance of power in ways no computer or map could predict. By late January 1991, Iraq's Air Force faced a grim reality. The coalition's relentless strikes had shattered command centers, radar networks, and air defenses. For Iraqi pilots, remaining in the skies meant almost certain death. Yet surrender was not an option. Saddam Hussein demanded continued resistance, and survival demanded ingenuity. Out of this crucible of desperation emerged a bold, perilous plan: escape to neighboring Iran. On January 26, the first jets roared across the desert at treetop level, skimming the sands to avoid detection by coalition radars. Every moment was a calculated gamble. The pilots knew that even a minor misstep could mean being shot down or forced to land in hostile territory. For those stationed near the border, the crossing was a single adrenaline-fueled push. 23 jets managed it in just one day, a feat that stunned military observers and confounded the press. But for Iraqi pilots stationed deeper within the country, the journey was far more hazardous. They had to refuel near Baghdad, navigate around coalition patrols, and time their departures with precision. Even then, danger lurked at every turn. Some jets were destroyed mid-flight, while others were forced to abort missions under pressure from coalition fighters. Yet many slipped through, exploiting gaps in the aerial blockade and relying on speed, stealth, and sheer nerve. By January 28, an astonishing 82 Iraqi aircraft had crossed into Iranian airspace. Coalition commanders scrambled to understand the scale of the exodus. Initially, some believed the pilots were abandoning the fight, defections born of fear or disillusionment, but intelligence reports hinted at something more deliberate, a calculated attempt to preserve aircraft, maintain a fighting force, and, perhaps, strike back when the opportunity arose. In response, the coalition established 5 combat patrols along the Iranian border. Each patrol consisted of 2 pairs of F-15 Eagles. Within Iraq, commanders monitored the situation with mounting tension. The MiG-29 Fulcrums, once feared for their speed and maneuverability, had failed repeatedly in combat. Each loss of aircraft and pilot deepened Saddam's frustration. Yet amidst this failure, the MiG-25 Foxbat Soldier, heavier, seemingly outclassed, proved capable of extraordinary feats. One Foxbat shot down an American F-18 during the opening night of airstrikes. Another intercepted radar jammers, forcing them to flee and inadvertently exposing an F-15 to surface-to-air missiles. These rare successes became beacons of hope. Iraqi pilots began to recognize that speed, timing, and clever tactics could compensate, at least in part, for technological inferiority. The Foxbats, designed decades earlier in the Soviet Union, were not agile dogfighters. Their radar systems were limited, and they struggled to track targets below the horizon. Yet their raw power, immense speed, and long-range R-40 missiles made them formidable in the hands of skilled, determined pilots. In this atmosphere of tension and opportunity, plans were being drawn for more than simple evasion. Iraqi ground controllers began identifying moments when coalition patrols would be most vulnerable during refueling or while separated by distance. The goal: execute ambushes that would catch even the technologically superior F-15s off guard. Days of careful monitoring, patient timing, and precise coordination would culminate in a series of encounters that defied expectations. For the pilots flying toward Iran, every flight was a test of nerves. Radar blips of coalition jets loomed as threats in the distance. Engines roared under full afterburner as they climbed to cruising altitude, weaving between hills and valleys to stay invisible. Each second demanded concentration, courage, and trust in both machine and comrade. Failure meant capture or death. Success meant survival, and perhaps a chance to strike back against an opponent who seemed invincible. The exodus to Iran was not merely a tactical maneuver, it was a statement. It demonstrated that even under overwhelming odds, human ingenuity and daring could create openings in what appeared to be an airtight blockade. It also underscored a fundamental truth of warfare. No plan, no matter how meticulously calculated, could account for the unpredictable element of individual action under extreme pressure. By the end of January, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test skill, strategy, and luck to their limits. The Iraqi pilots who had reached Iran preserved the remnants of a once formidable air force, while those remaining in Iraq prepared for desperate, audacious actions that would soon bring them face to face with the apex of coalition air power. In the skies above the Gulf, a drama of speed, firepower, and nerve was quietly unfolding, one that history would largely overlook, but which would leave an indelible mark on those who survived it. Amid the chaos of January 1991, Iraq's MiG-25 Foxbats quietly assumed a role few outside Baghdad would ever learn. Soviet-built in the 1960s, the Foxbat was designed as a high-altitude interceptor, a relic of Cold War engineering. Its sleek, imposing frame betrayed a raw power that could reach speeds exceeding Mach 2.8, and its long-range R-40 missiles were capable of striking targets over 80 kilometers away. It was not agile, nor was it sophisticated by modern standards. But in the hands of audacious pilots, it became something altogether more dangerous, a secret weapon that could exploit the blind spots of the most advanced fighter jets ever built. For Saddam Hussein, the MiG-25 represented a rare glimmer of hope, while the MiG-29 Fulcrums had faltered repeatedly in combat. Losing every engagement against coalition F-15s and F-16s, the Foxbats had demonstrated that, under the right circumstances, even an older aircraft could challenge air superiority. During the initial nights of coalition airstrikes, one Foxbat shot down an American F-18, another intercepted radar jammers, forcing them to flee and inadvertently exposing a nearby F-15 to a surface-to-air missile. These rare victories were celebrated, broadcast quietly through Iraqi channels, and analyzed meticulously by Saddam's generals. The secret lay not in technology alone, but but in tactics and timing. Coalition F-15s, though agile and armed with radar-guided missiles, were vulnerable during predictable moments: Madeira refueling, patrol rotations, and separation between paired units. Iraqi ground controllers studied these patterns, patiently plotting the moments when the Eagles would be most exposed. Their strategy was audacious yet simple: lure the F-15s into a pincer maneuver, striking from two directions simultaneously to maximize confusion and exploit the Foxbat's speed. In the days leading up to the engagement, pilots trained on simulators and in empty skies. Running through scenarios with meticulous precision, Captain Mahmoud Awad and Captain Mohammed S. Amarai, among the most skilled in Iraq's Air Force, were selected for the mission. Both understood the risks. They were flying outdated aircraft against opponents with superior radar, missiles, and training. A single miscalculation could be fatal. Yet for these men, survival was inseparable from courage, skill, and the opportunity to prove that even the underdog could create chaos in the teeth of overwhelming power. The Foxbat itself was a paradox, too heavy and unwieldy for close dogfighting. With radar incapable of tracking targets below the horizon, it was ill-suited to traditional combat scenarios. Yet these limitations became advantages when paired with clever tactics. Flying at extreme altitudes and maximum speed, the Foxbats could strike unexpectedly, forcing F-15 pilots to react in fractions of a second. Missiles like the R-40, long and powerful, could hit targets at distances no other aircraft could achieve, turning the desert sky into a theater of sudden danger. Coalition intelligence underestimated the Foxbat's potential. Analysts focused on Iraq's technological inferiority, counting aircraft losses and assuming that remaining jets were no longer a threat. But in the hands of pilots who knew every contour of their home skies, every radar, blind spot, and the psychological habits of their opponents, the MiG-25 could become a weapon of surprise. The upcoming engagements would test this theory in ways that would stun even the most seasoned military observers. Behind the scenes, Saddam's command pushed forward with meticulous coordination. Ground controllers tracked coalition F-15 patrols, calculating moments when pilots would be most vulnerable. The plan hinged on patience and precision. Wait for the right moment, strike from opposite directions, and exploit the Foxbat's unmatched speed. It was a gamble, the kind of risk that could end in disaster or legendary success. As dawn approached on January 30th, radar screens in Baghdad picked up a target northeast of the city. Orders were dispatched immediately. Captain Awad scrambled north from one airbase, while Captain Samarai took off from another to the south. The jets climbed rapidly to 42,000 feet, engines screaming, as the pilots prepared for a confrontation that would pit raw courage against technological supremacy. The world above Baghdad was about to witness an extraordinary collision of tactics, skill, and sheer nerve. The MiG-25s, once relics of a bygone era, were now on the cusp of rewriting expectations. Their mission was not just survival, it was a test of human ingenuity under pressure, an audacious challenge to the belief that advanced technology alone could dictate the outcome of combat. In the coming hours, speed, timing, and daring would become the deciding factors in a confrontation that would shock both Iraq and the coalition forces alike. In the quiet hours before the afternoon sun rose high over eastern Baghdad, the Iraqi Air Force prepared one of the most daring maneuvers of the Gulf War. The coalition had established a formidable aerial blockade along the Iranian border. F-15 Eagles patrolling relentlessly in pairs, their radar and missile systems ready to annihilate any intruder. For most pilots, a direct confrontation would have been unthinkable. But the Foxbats were not going to meet the enemy head-on, they were going to outthink them. The plan was a higher-risk pincer maneuver designed to exploit the brief moments when the F-15 patrols were most vulnerable. Iraqi ground control calculated the timing meticulously. Two MiG-25s, flying from separate bases, would approach from opposite directions. When the patrol split for mid-air refueling or veered apart on their rotation, the first Foxbat would draw the attention of one F-15, while the second struck from the flank, using its extraordinary speed to close distance before the coalition pilots could react. It was audacious, precise, and dependent on flawless timing. Captain Mahmoud Awad, a seasoned pilot known for his composure under pressure, was vectored to intercept from the north. Captain Mohammed S. Amarai, equally skilled and daring, would come from the south. Both knew the stakes. These were outdated machines, relics of a Cold War era, facing the apex of modern fighter design. One mistake, one misjudged turn, one failed missile, and they would be destroyed. But each also understood the Foxbat's advantage: raw speed and long-range missiles capable of hitting the F-15s before the Eagles could close the gap. For hours, the pilots circled, their ground controllers monitoring every blip, every movement of coalition aircraft, searching for the exact moment to strike. Patience was as critical as aggression. A premature move would expose them to overwhelming firepower, while hesitation could let opportunity slip away entirely. The tension in the command centers mirrored that in the cockpit: sweat, anticipation, and a quiet resolve that each pilot would need to be at their absolute best. Coalition forces, meanwhile, remained unaware of the precise threat. To them, the MiG-25s were a known quantity, relics of outdated Soviet engineering. The F-15 patrols continued their high-speed cycles, confident that the airspace was secure. Yet even the most sophisticated radar systems cannot account for the unpredictability of human decision-making and the audacity of desperate men, willing to exploit a narrow window of vulnerability. The Foxbat's mission was not merely a tactical strike. It was a test of human ingenuity against overwhelming technological superiority. Each maneuver had to be timed to perfection. Climbs, turns, missile locks, and speed bursts calculated down to the second. Ground controllers provided vectors, but the pilots had to make instant decisions in the split-second chaos of combat, where lives and aircraft hung in the balance. As midday approached, Iraqi radar detected a patrol northeast of Baghdad. Orders were transmitted instantly. Scramble engines roared to life as a Wad and a Samurai lifted from separate bases. Climbing to 42,000 feet in near silence above a nation in turmoil, they were no longer simply escaping or evading. They were about to take the fight to the very apex of coalition air power. The plan's elegance lay in its simplicity. Use the Foxbat's superior speed to initiate the attack from unexpected angles, forcing the F-15s to respond before they could effectively coordinate. The first MiG-25 to acquire lock would engage its target, drawing attention and fire, while the second exploited the opening to strike from the blind spot. Timing, altitude, and coordination had to be flawless. In the world of aerial combat, a single misstep could turn a cunning ambush into a fatal trap. The Iraqi pilots waited, engines humming, eyes scanning the sky. The ground controllers monitored radar with a tense vigilance, aware that the difference between success and catastrophe lay in the seconds to come. In those moments, Baghdad's skies became a stage for a dramatic contest of skill, nerve, and strategy where audacity could level the playing field against the most advanced technology ever deployed. By the early afternoon, the moment had arrived. The coalition's F-15 patrol was in position. The Foxbats were vectored for attack, and the intricate plan was ready to unfold. For the next few minutes, the skies over Iraq would become a chessboard of speed, missiles, and split-second decisions, each move potentially rewriting the balance of power in the Gulf War. The stage was set, the players were ready, and history was about to witness a confrontation that, while largely unknown to the world, would demonstrate the deadly combination of strategy, daring, and the human will to survive against overwhelming odds. January 30, 1991, dawned over eastern Baghdad with a deceptive calm. Below, the streets were quiet, unaware that high above, two of the most lethal fighter jets ever built were about to face a challenge few could imagine. Captain Mahmoud Awad and Captain Mohammed S. Samurai, flying their MiG-25 Foxbats, had climbed to 42,000 feet. Engines screaming, their flight paths converging on the patrols of F-15 Eagles that guarded the coalition's aerial blockade. Every second now mattered. Hesitation could mean death. Precision could mean survival. Radar operators in Baghdad tracked the Eagles, calculating the patrol's trajectory and the exact moment to initiate the ambush. Ground control vectored Awad, north of the city, and Samurai, to the south. The plan was simple in theory. Engage the F-15s in a pincer maneuver, striking from opposite directions to exploit the coalition jets' separation and momentary vulnerabilities. In practice, it was extraordinarily complex, demanding flawless timing, coordination, and nerves of steel. As the Foxbats closed in, their ancient radars struggled to acquire the advanced F-15s, a testament to the technological gap they faced. Yet they had one advantage the Eagles did not anticipate: audacity and unpredictability. As Samurai fired the first R-40 missile, expecting a clean hit, but instead, the radar lock was false. There was no F-15 in the immediate vicinity, only a phantom on the screens. For a brief moment, the pilots questioned the reliability of their instruments, but there was no time to dwell on doubt. Survival demanded rapid adaptation. Meanwhile, an American E-3 Sentry early warning plane, stationed over Saudi Arabia, detected the MiG-25s approaching Baghdad. The Sentry alerted two F-15s patrolling 5 kilometers east, flown by Captain Tom Dietz and Captain Bob Hateman. The Eagles accelerated to intercept, unaware that the Foxbats were already maneuvering to exploit every possible advantage. Seconds became crucial. The distance between life and death narrowed with each passing heartbeat. The MiG-25s executed a textbook pincer approach, though not perfectly as planned. The Eagles spotted them and turned to engage. Awad and Samurai pressed forward, climbing to intercept, using their speed to close the distance faster than the Americans anticipated. The Foxbats were heavy and clumsy compared to the nimble F-15s, yet their raw power allowed them to dictate engagement terms. It was a battle of strategy and nerves as much as it was a test of machine capabilities. Hayaman fired his first AIM-7 missile at Samurai yet. The missile failed to ignite. Another followed, also ineffective. Simultaneously, Samurai launched an R-40 in return, striking dangerously close to the F-15 and damaging its left engine. Dietz attempted to engage a WAD, firing missile after missile, each failing to launch or detach. The Eagles, with all their technological sophistication, suddenly found themselves vulnerable to aircraft they had been trained to consider inferior. In a matter of minutes, chaos reigned in the sky. Flares and chaff were deployed as Hayaman and Dietz attempted evasive maneuvers. The Foxbats, taking advantage of their speed, twisted and turned, avoiding the full brunt of the American missiles. The engagement, though brief, demonstrated the lethal potential of skillful planning combined with daring execution. What began as a desperate gamble by Iraqi pilots had transformed into a dramatic standoff that tested the limits of modern aerial warfare. Despite the intensity, neither side could claim absolute dominance. Awad and Samurai, their aircraft intact but strained, began to disengage, retreating west toward Baghdad's heavily defended airspace. The Eagles, battered and frustrated, also withdrew. The confrontation had ended in a tenuous draw. 2 MiG-25s survived. One F-15 was slightly damaged, and the coalition's confidence had been rattled, however, briefly. For the Iraqi pilots, the outcome was a triumph of courage and ingenuity over technology. Against all odds, they had challenged the most lethal fighters in the world and emerged largely unscathed. They claimed victories, some disputed, some exaggerated, but the psychological impact was undeniable. Even the most advanced air forces could be surprised, tested, and, under the right circumstances, challenged by ingenuity, patience, and sheer daring. The skies over Baghdad had witnessed an audacious display of tactical brilliance. The MiG-25s, long considered obsolete relics, had proven that strategy and courage could momentarily level the playing field. In the broader sweep of the Gulf War, this engagement would be a footnote, largely ignored by history. Yet for those involved, it was a testament to the unpredictability of combat and the enduring human instinct to survive, adapt, and fight even when the odds seem insurmountable. In the wake of the ambush over eastern Baghdad, the skies became a maze of uncertainty, a battlefield where radar blips and phantom targets turned every decision into a gamble. Iraqi ground control, still reeling from the audacity of the Foxbats maneuvers, tracked anomalies on their screens. Some were real fast-moving F-15s, scrambling to intercept, but others were false alarms, radar echoes caused by terrain, electronic interference, or even atmospheric quirks. For pilots, distinguishing reality from illusion became a matter of life and death. Captain Awad and Captain Samurai, returning from their pincer attempt, found themselves navigating a sky that seemed to conspire against them. Every radar blip raised the tension. Every contact was treated as a potential threat. Ground controllers vectored them cautiously, aware that a misstep could send these valuable jets into the path of coalition missiles or anti-aircraft defenses. The Foxbats' raw speed was both a blessing and a challenge. While it allowed them to evade most threats, it also left little margin for error during sudden maneuvers. Across the border, coalition forces were equally disoriented. The E-3 Sentry continued to monitor the situation, feeding warnings to Captain Dietz and Captain Hayaman. Early alerts had been called off, misidentifying the MiG-25's positions. The Eagles, though superior in technology, faced a situation where timing, radar anomalies, and human unpredictability created fleeting windows of vulnerability. Every missile launch had to be considered carefully. False alarms could result in wasted ordnance, or, worse, leaving the pilot exposed to a real threat. Despite the confusion, the Foxbats pressed their advantage, using speed, altitude, and the limited detection capability of their adversaries. The Iraqi pilots maneuvered cautiously but assertively. Samurai fired an R-40 missile at Hayaman, forcing evasive maneuvers and demonstrating that even a slightly outdated aircraft could still challenge the apex of modern air power. Dietz, meanwhile, struggled with repeated missile failures, each attempt a reminder that technological superiority did not guarantee control of the engagement. The sky became a theater of tension, each second stretching longer than the last. Pilots had to make split-second decisions: to engage or evade, to trust radar readings or instincts, to push their machines to the limit or risk being outmaneuvered. The battle, though brief, was a masterclass in chaos management. Coalition confidence, though outwardly unshaken, had been quietly rattled. For Iraq, these moments were a rare victory in an otherwise collapsing air defense network. Ground control and radar operators played a critical role, directing the MiG-25s through a web of false contacts and actual threats. Their skill and intuition allowed the pilots to exploit the coalition's miscalculations, creating opportunities to escape, counterattack, or simply survive. The combination of human judgment and machine performance demonstrated that in modern warfare, technology alone does not dictate outcomes. By the time the engagement wound down, both sides had endured a psychological jolt. The Eagles, for all their sophistication, had faced missiles that failed to launch, missed locks, and the unexpected speed of their adversaries. The Foxbats had emerged with both pilots largely unharmed, one slightly damaged F-15, their only tangible reward. Yet beyond the physical outcomes, the intangible effects: confidence shaken, nerves tested. The reminder that even small forces can challenge overwhelming power would linger far longer. In the hours following, coalition analysts scrambled to understand the anomalies, dismissing some claims as overblown, while quietly reviewing missile system failures and radar misreads. Iraqi commanders, for their part, celebrated the rare success, even if it would never make headlines outside the region. The encounter validated audacity, planning, and precise execution under extreme pressure. For the pilots themselves, it was a testament to courage, skill, and the extraordinary unpredictability of aerial combat. The skies over Baghdad had become a crucible, testing both technology and human ingenuity. In just a few intense minutes, outdated aircraft had challenged modern war machines. False alarms had turned into strategic tools, and split-second decisions had determined survival. The chaos of the skies served as a stark reminder. In warfare, the unexpected often wields more power than sheer firepower, and victory can be found in moments that history might barely notice. As the MiG-25s closed in on the F-15s, the skies over eastern Baghdad erupted into a tense, high-stakes ballet of speed, missiles, and split-second decisions. Captain Mahmoud Awad and Captain Mohammed S. Samurai, each piloting their aging Foxbats, were now locked in a direct confrontation with two of the most advanced fighters ever built. The Eagles, flown by Captain Tom Dietz and Captain Bob Hinman, represented the pinnacle of coalition air power, radar-guided missiles, advanced avionics, and unmatched agility. Yet in the chaos of the desert sky, even these advantages could be neutralized by strategy, audacity, and a touch of luck. As Samurai achieved lock first, unleashing an R-40 missile toward Hinman. The missile's trail streaked across the sky, a testament to the Foxbat's raw speed and long-range capability. But Hinman, relying on years of training and quick reflexes, executed an evasive maneuver, deploying chaff and flares to confuse the incoming threat. The missile detonated nearby, damaging the F-15's left engine but failing to bring it down. Near miss that highlighted both the danger and the unpredictability of air combat. Meanwhile, Awad engaged Dietz. Firing his own R-40, Dietz attempted to respond with a series of AIM-7 missiles, each one failing to ignite or detach properly, a malfunction that underscored the limits even of modern technology under the stress of battle. The Eagles, designed to dominate the skies, found themselves momentarily vulnerable, forced to rely on instinct and maneuvering rather than technological superiority. The dogfight evolved into a tense chess game at Mach 2 speeds. Each pilot was acutely aware that a single era-delayed turn, a misjudged altitude, or an overcommitment could prove fatal. As Samurai, racing north to evade the AIM-7, and Herman, deploying countermeasures to survive the R-40, demonstrated the lethal combination of human skill and machine performance. Every movement was measured, every decision calculated in fractions of a second. The engagement was brief but intense, a blur of jets twisting and diving in the stratosphere. The Foxbats, though heavy and unwieldy, exploited their superior speed, using sudden bursts to evade missiles and force the Eagles to react defensively. The F-15s, relying on radar guidance and missile systems, struggled with the unanticipated tactics of aircraft long considered obsolete. For a fleeting moment, the balance of power in the skies seemed to shift. The underdog challenging the apex predator in a deadly aerial dance. As the dogfight reached its peak, both sides began to disengage. Hammond, realizing he was vulnerable and that his missiles had failed to neutralize the MiG, turned east, using terrain and evasive maneuvers to escape. Dietz, similarly frustrated by repeated missile failures, made the decision to withdraw to avoid unnecessary risk. The Foxbats, with engines screaming and flight paths calculated to maximize distance from the Eagles, retreated toward Baghdad. Their mission far from over, but their immediate objective accomplished: survival and demonstration of tactical capability. When the dust, or rather, the contrails cleared, the results were deceptively simple on paper. 2 MiG-25s returned to base, largely intact. One F-15 had suffered minor damage, but no aircraft were lost. Yet the implications were far more profound. Coalition confidence, while outwardly unaffected, had been shaken by the near misses and the fact that every missile fired against the Foxbats had failed to achieve a confirmed kill. For Iraq, these moments were a psychological victory, proof that careful planning, skill, and daring could occasionally overcome technological inferiority. The dogfight over Baghdad would never become a celebrated headline, nor would it feature prominently in most official accounts of the Gulf War. Yet for the pilots who lived through it, the engineers who tracked it, and the commanders who risked everything on a calculated gamble, It was a defining moment, a vivid reminder that aerial combat was not merely a contest of machines, but of minds, nerves, and the relentless drive to survive against overwhelming odds. In that high-altitude arena, the MiG-25s had proven that speed, audacity, and strategy could momentarily level the playing field. That even relics of a bygone era could challenge the apex of modern aviation. For a brief, intense window, the underdog had held its own and the skies over Baghdad had witnessed a confrontation that few would ever fully appreciate, yet none would ever forget. With the dogfight concluded, the two MiG-25 Foxbats now faced the most perilous part of their mission, returning safely to their airfields within Baghdad's heavily defended airspace, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. Captain Mahmoudawad and Captain Mohammed Asamarai relied on every ounce of training and instinct. As they navigated through a sky thick with potential threats, coalition radar, anti-aircraft batteries, and the ever-present uncertainty of mechanical failure. Every second of their retreat demanded acute awareness. Their engines roared as they descended from 42,000 feet, weaving through air corridors carefully monitored by ground control. Coalition forces, still attempting to understand the earlier engagement, scrambled additional patrols, eager to intercept the retreating MiGs. Yet the Foxbats' combination of speed and altitude manipulation allowed the pilots to exploit small gaps in surveillance, slipping past coalition interceptors with a mix of precision and daring that defied expectation. Back at coalition command centers, analysts pored over radar feeds, trying to piece together what had just occurred. Reports came in missiles fired that failed, Eagles narrowly dodging R-40s, a slightly damaged F-15, but no confirmed kills on either side. Confusion reigned as false alarms and misreadings muddled the picture. The psychological impact, however, was undeniable. The seemingly invincible F-15s had been challenged and forced to retreat, at least temporarily. For the Iraqi pilots, every kilometer toward safety was a test of nerves, as Samurai's R-40 had damaged Hemon's F-15, a reminder that even in retreat, the Foxbats could exert influence and leave their mark. Awad and Samurai maintained communication with ground control, adjusting altitude and heading with a precision born from years of training under harsh conditions. One wrong turn could mean interception or, worse, a collision with their own anti-air defenses. The Foxbats touched down safely, engines winding down, systems still hot from the intensity of combat. There was no celebration, only the quiet relief of survival and the awareness that their mission, though daring and partially successful, was only a momentary triumph in the larger context of a collapsing air force. Across Iraq, air bases absorbed the returning pilots, performing rapid checks on the aircraft and noting the minor damages sustained. For the MiG-25s, survival was itself a victory. In the following hours, Iraqi commanders debriefed their pilots, attempting to extract lessons and record the engagement's successes. Claims of missile hits and near damage to F-15s circulated quickly within Iraqi circles, while coalition officials publicly dismissed any significant impact. Internally, analysts had to reconsider the vulnerabilities revealed during the encounter. Even advanced systems were not infallible. Human ingenuity, timing, and the audacity of determined pilots could disrupt operations in ways technology alone could not predict. The engagement also served as a final reminder of what was at stake for the Iraqi Air Force. Weeks later, with Saddam Hussein's surrender imminent and coalition forces liberating Kuwait, the surviving aircraft that had escaped to Iran, including some MiG-25s, would never return. Seized by the Iranians, they became both trophies and a silent testament to a once formidable air force, now reduced to remnants. The Foxbats' daring sortie over Baghdad was, in retrospect, the last gasp of Iraqi aerial defiance. For the coalition, the incident was a minor disruption, a jolt in an otherwise dominant air campaign. Yet even in victory, the engagement highlighted the thin line between confidence and complacency. Advanced fighters, sophisticated radar, and missile systems could be challenged by strategy, timing, and the human element. Lessons learned in those fleeting moments would inform operations, protocols, and cautionary procedures for the remainder of the Gulf War. In the quiet aftermath, both sides recognized a shared truth. Air combat is unpredictable. Technology matters, yes, but so do courage, improvisation, and the ability to exploit fleeting opportunities. Awad and Asamarai had survived, returning to base with both skill and luck on their side. The Foxbats may have been outdated, but for a brief, tense window over Baghdad, they had rewritten the rules of engagement, proving that even against overwhelming odds, survival and impact was possible. In the days following the January 30th ambush, the events over eastern Baghdad rippled far beyond the immediate skirmish. While the coalition maintained unquestioned dominance in the Gulf War, analysts and commanders quietly acknowledged the lessons embedded in those tense minutes of aerial combat. The MiG-25s, long considered obsolete relics of the Soviet arsenal, had exposed vulnerabilities in the coalition's air operations missile malfunctions, radar anomalies, and the limits of technological superiority when faced with human ingenuity. For the Iraqi Air Force, the sortie offered a fleeting psychological boost. It was a demonstration that, even in the shadow of overwhelming power, audacity and careful planning could produce tangible results. Ground controllers debriefed the pilots meticulously, analyzing tactics, timing, and decision-making. Every detail of the engagement from missile launches to evasive maneuvers was studied to extract maximum value. The Foxbat's speed and the skill of their pilots had bought Iraq a rare moment of leverage, one that had, however briefly, unsettled their adversaries. The coalition, meanwhile, was forced to reconsider operational assumptions. Confidence in the F-15s and the integrated air patrols had been shaken, even if only temporarily. The failure of multiple AIM-7 missiles to ignite during combat raised questions about maintenance, readiness, and the reliability of systems under combat stress. Radar operators, air controllers, and pilots were reminded that real combat rarely follows textbook scenarios and that even superior technology cannot entirely eliminate uncertainty. These lessons, though minor in the grand sweep of the war, informed training and engagement strategies for future operations. Strategically, the ambush highlighted the unpredictable nature of air warfare. Saddam Hussein's order to have aircraft flee to Iran, an act born of desperation, had created a scenario where a handful of aircraft could engage coalition forces in unexpected ways. While most of Iraq's air power had already been neutralized, the ability of a few pilots to exploit gaps and seize fleeting opportunities forced coalition commanders to remain vigilant at all times. It was a vivid reminder that in war, even remnants of a defeated force could influence events, and that complacency could be costly. Beyond military calculations, the ambush had implications for morale and perception. For Iraqis, the successful sortie became a rare moment of pride, a story to be recounted amid the chaos of retreat and surrender. For coalition forces, it was a cautionary tale. Technological dominance does not guarantee infallibility. Every engagement, no matter how minor, could contain surprises, and every pilot, missile, and radar blip could hold the potential for the unexpected. In a broader historical sense, the encounter underscored a fundamental truth about warfare. Human creativity, courage, and decision-making often matter as much as machines and firepower. The MiG-25s, designed decades earlier in the Soviet Union and considered outdated by contemporary standards, had demonstrated that speed, planning, and audacity could momentarily offset technological gaps. For military historians, the incident became a case study in asymmetric tactics within an ostensibly one-sided conflict. The ambush also foreshadowed the limits of Iraq's air capabilities in the coming weeks. While the surviving jets that escaped to Iran would be seized and never returned, the sortie over Baghdad remained a testament to what could be achieved even under extreme adversity. It was, in effect, the last meaningful combat action of Iraq's once formidable Air Force's symbolic stand that combined desperation, skill, and audacity in a final, fleeting display of defiance. Ultimately, the January 30th engagement did not alter the outcome of the Gulf War. The coalition's dominance remained intact, and Saddam Hussein's forces would soon face liberation operations in Kuwait. Yet the encounter left an indelible mark on both sides, a demonstration that in modern warfare, the unexpected can surface even when victory seems assured, and that courage, planning, and daring can momentarily rewrite the rules of engagement. The events over eastern Baghdad on January 30, 1991, offered more than just a thrilling aerial confrontation. They provided enduring lessons for air warfare that would resonate long after the Gulf War ended. Military historians often regard the ambush as a reminder that even in conflicts dominated by overwhelming technological superiority, human decision-making and tactical creativity remain crucial. The engagement between the MiG-25s and F-15s served as a microcosm of modern air combat, where the interplay of technology, strategy, and psychology could shift outcomes in unexpected ways. For the Iraqi Air Force, the sortie underscored both the potential and the limitations of their fleet. The MiG-29s, despite being state-of-the-art and fast, had failed to achieve any meaningful victories in prior engagements. The MiG-25s, by contrast, long considered obsolete, demonstrated that raw speed and careful planning could create opportunities even against superior opponents. The Foxbat's long range are 40 missiles, their ability to climb rapidly to high altitudes, and the pilot's disciplined maneuvers combined to exploit gaps in coalition patrol patterns. It was a lesson that even outdated platforms, if employed wisely, could remain formidable in the right hands. On the coalition side, the encounter revealed vulnerabilities in otherwise dominant systems. AIM-7, Sparrow missile failures, radar anomalies, and the inability to achieve confirmed kills against the Foxbats highlighted that technological sophistication does not guarantee infallibility. Training, protocol, and equipment readiness all played critical roles in combat effectiveness. Commanders were reminded that continuous evaluation, maintenance, and the human factor were as important as cutting-edge avionics and weapons systems. The broader implications extended beyond the Gulf War. The ambush became a case study for air forces worldwide, emphasizing key principles: the importance of intelligence and anticipation, the need to consider enemy tactics, even those that seem improbable, and the enduring value of pilot skill and adaptability. It also demonstrated that high-speed aerial engagements are inherently chaotic. Outcomes are shaped as much by split-second judgment as by missile velocity or radar range. Psychologically, the engagement reinforced an essential truth about warfare: confidence can be shaken even in overwhelmingly dominant forces. The coalition's pilots, though superior in aircraft and support systems, faced moments of uncertainty and vulnerability. Conversely, the Iraqi pilots experienced a rare surge in morale, a reminder that even in dire circumstances, daring and ingenuity could provide tangible with success. The lessons of that day also foreshadowed the evolution of air combat doctrine. Military planners began to place greater emphasis on redundancy, electronic warfare, and pilot decision-making under stress. The importance of anticipating unexpected enemy maneuvers became central to training exercises and simulation programs. The Gulf War's high-tech air campaign was undoubtedly decisive, but the Foxbat's brief success illustrated that even in asymmetrical scenarios, careful planning and audacity could leave a mark. Finally, the engagement serves as a historical bridge linking past and future conflicts. Just as earlier air wars over Europe, Korea, and Vietnam had demonstrated the interplay of technology, tactics, and human resilience. The ambush over Baghdad reinforced that principle in the age of supersonic jets and precision-guided weapons. It reminded the world that air combat is never purely mechanical. It is a contest of skill, psychology, and daring, played out at speeds and altitudes that defy ordinary comprehension. In the annals of military history, the January 30th ambush stands not as a battle that altered the course of the Gulf War, but as a vivid illustration of the unpredictable, human-driven element that defines all combat. The MiG-25's fleeting success offers enduring insight. That strategy, courage, and ingenuity can occasionally level even the most technologically lopsided playing field, and that the skies, no matter how dominated, always hold room for surprise. The January 30th engagement over Baghdad offered not only a dramatic story of survival, but also a rare opportunity to analyze the technical capabilities and limitations of both the MiG-25 Foxbat and the F-15 Eagle in real combat. Military aviation experts have long debated the encounter, dissecting every detail from missile performance to maneuverability to understand how these aircraft interacted in one of the Gulf War's most unusual dogfights. The MiG-25, designed by the Soviet Union in the 1960s, was originally conceived as a high-altitude interceptor capable of outpacing almost any adversary. It could reach speeds exceeding Mach 2.8, climb 2 altitudes above 80,000 feet, and carry long-range R-40 missiles capable of striking targets 80 kilometers away. Its radar system, however, was rudimentary by 1991 standards, lacking look-down shoot-down capability and struggling to track low-flying targets. The aircraft was heavy, poorly suited for tight-turning dogfights, and required careful planning to exploit its strengths without exposing its vulnerabilities. The F-15 Eagle, in contrast, represented the pinnacle of Western air superiority. With state-of-the-art radar, highly responsive fly-by-wire controls, and a suite of air-to-air missiles, including the AIM-7 Sparrow and AIM-9 Sidewinder, the Eagle was designed to dominate the skies. Its agility allowed it to outmaneuver most contemporary fighters, while its avionics provided unmatched situational awareness in combat. In theory, the MiG-25 should have been no match. Yet the actual engagement demonstrated how context and tactics could offset raw technological advantage. During the ambush, the Foxbats leveraged their superior speed and altitude to approach the F-15 patrols at moments of vulnerability, particularly during refueling maneuvers or flight path transitions. The pincer strategy, meticulously orchestrated by Iraqi ground control, aimed to split coalition forces and exploit moments when the Eagles were distracted or limited in maneuverability. The high-speed R-40 missiles, while sometimes unreliable, allowed the MiGs to threaten the F-15s at a distance, forcing defensive maneuvers even without scoring a confirmed kill. Conversely, the F-15s relied on their radar and missile systems to maintain an edge, but the AIM-7 Sparrow failures during the encounter revealed a critical lesson. Even advanced systems could falter under the stress of combat, particularly when unexpected tactics were employed. Pilots Dietz and Hellman were forced to engage in manual evasive maneuvers, relying on skill and instinct rather than technology. This human element proved decisive in preventing greater damage and ultimately ensuring the coalition aircraft survived the engagement. Tactically, the engagement illustrated the concept of asymmetric advantages in air warfare. The MiG-25s could not outturn or outfight the F-15s in traditional dogfighting metrics. But by exploiting speed, timing, and the element of surprise, the Iraqi pilots created opportunities for themselves. For the Eagles, technological superiority provided confidence but demanded constant adaptation when faced with unconventional threats. Both sides were reminded that air combat is not purely a test of machines. It is a multidimensional contest of prediction, reflex, and creativity under extreme conditions. In post-battle assessments, analysts highlighted several key takeaways. The MiG-25's success relied on disciplined adherence to plan, aggressive use of altitude and speed, and precise timing. The F-15s, while ultimately dominant, encountered scenarios where missile systems failed, forcing reliance on traditional piloting skills. The incident became a case study for both air forces and military academies worldwide, demonstrating that even highly advanced platforms must account for the unpredictable, human and mechanical variables inherent in aerial warfare. Ultimately, the technical analysis of this engagement underscored a timeless truth. Air combat is a balance between machine capability and human ingenuity. Speed, firepower, and radar are critical, but the ability to adapt, anticipate, and exploit fleeting advantages often determines the outcome. In the high-stakes sky over Baghdad, the MiG-25s had proven that even underdog aircraft could punch above their weight, leaving lessons that would resonate for decades in military aviation circles. Amid the roar of engines, flashing missiles, and the sheer chaos of aerial combat, the human element remained at the heart of the January 30th engagement. Captain Mahmoud Awad and Captain Mohammed as-Samurai were not merely operators of powerful machines. They were pilots in the purest sense, individuals whose decisions, courage, and reflexes defined the outcome in ways that no radar or missile could. Their story is as much about skill and instinct as it is about the MiG-25 itself. Both pilots had trained under the rigorous constraints of the Iraqi Air Force, a force shaped by a decade of authoritarian rule and constant preparation for conflict. Years of disciplined practice, simulations, and a keen understanding of their aircraft had prepared them for high-stress scenarios, but nothing could truly replicate the intensity of facing F-15 Eagles in real combat. As they scrambled from separate air bases near Baghdad, every action had to be precise. Their climb to 42,000 feet was not just a maneuver. It was a race against detection, a careful balance between aggression and caution. For Awad and as-Samurai, the dogfight became a mental and physical trial. Tracking, targeting, and evading at Mach 2 speeds required instantaneous calculations, a perfect harmony between brain and machine. They communicated constantly with ground control, adjusting headings, altitudes, and timing. Each missile fired, each evasive maneuver executed, was a calculated gamble. One misjudgment could have been fatal. In those moments, the air became a chessboard, and the stakes were life or death. The psychological weight was immense. While coalition forces relied heavily on technological dominance, the Iraqi pilots knew that every decision could exploit a fall victim to the imperfections of the Eagles systems. The repeated failure of AIM-7 missiles became a window of opportunity, allowing them to survive attacks that would have otherwise been lethal. The tension between fear and focus, risk and reward, became a crucible that tested their skill and resolve to the limit. After the engagement, returning to base brought its own challenges. The adrenaline slowly ebbed, replaced by reflection and analysis. The pilots debriefed with ground controllers, recounting each maneuver, each missile launch, each fleeting encounter with F-15s. While their victory was partial, they had not downed an eagle. They had survived against formidable odds, and in doing so, reaffirmed the critical role of human judgment in modern air combat. From the coalition perspective, pilots Dietz and Hemin faced their own test of nerve and skill, relying on advanced radar and missile systems. They were nonetheless forced into split-second decisions when technology faltered. The pilots had to adapt instantly, executing evasive maneuvers and defensive strategies under intense pressure. Their actions highlighted that even the most advanced aircraft are only as effective as the humans who operate them. In the aftermath, both sides would analyze the engagement extensively. Iraqi accounts emphasized bravery, precision, and the rare success against technologically superior opponents. Coalition reports, while minimizing the impact of the engagement, acknowledged lessons learned regarding missile reliability and tactical adaptability. Across the Gulf War, this encounter became a quietly referenced example of how individual skill, courage, and quick thinking could momentarily tilt the scales in even the most asymmetrical battles. Ultimately, the pilots' heroes of the sky embodied the timeless truth of aerial combat. Machines are powerful, but human skill, intuition, and audacity remain decisive. Awad and as-Samurai like Dietz and Hemin navigated a deadly contest of speed, technology, and strategy, each emerging with their own lessons, memories, and scars from a battle that would echo through military history. The skies over Baghdad, for those brief moments, became a proving ground where courage and cunning met raw power, leaving an indelible mark on the narrative of modern warfare. In the wake of the January 30th engagement, the skies over Baghdad grew silent once more, but the reverberations of that brief tense encounter echoed far beyond the battlefield. Iraqi pilots returned to their bases with a mix of relief and pride, while coalition forces meticulously reviewed what had just unfolded. Though the broader air campaign continued without interruption, the ambush had left its mark on both morale and operational thinking. Iraqi claims of success spread quickly within military circles. Pilots reported that they had inflicted damage on F-15 Eagles, citing missile strikes that had, in their assessment, resulted in at least one aircraft being partially disabled. Even though coalition officials publicly dismissed these claims that no Eagles had been down, the internal acknowledgement of unexpected missile failures and the temporary disruption of patrol formations suggested that the engagement had unsettled coalition confidence. It was a reminder that even in overwhelming dominance, vulnerability could surface in fleeting, unpredictable ways. For Saddam Hussein and his commanders, the ambush was both a rare moment of tactical validation and a stark acknowledgement of desperation. The order to scramble jets toward Iran, a decision born of necessity, had inadvertently created an opportunity for audacious pilots to challenge the coalition directly. While the broader strategic situation remained bleak, the sortie became a symbolic victory, a fleeting demonstration that ingenuity and courage could produce measurable results, even when the odds were stacked overwhelmingly against them. Coalition commanders analyzed every aspect of the encounter, noting the failure rates of multiple AIM-7 Sparrow missiles, radar anomalies, and the MiG-25's surprising effectiveness in exploiting gaps in patrol coverage. Training protocols were reviewed, and new emphasis was placed on anticipating asymmetric tactics from even ostensibly outmatched opponents. The engagement became a case study in the limitations of technology, emphasizing that human skill, timing, and audacity could not be entirely mitigated by advanced aircraft or sophisticated radar systems. For the Iraqi Air Force, however, the ambush represented the last significant act of defiance. The surviving aircraft that had escaped into Iran would never return, confiscated and absorbed by the Iranian military. The once formidable Iraqi air fleet, already diminished by relentless coalition strikes, was now effectively neutralized. The sortie over Baghdad would remain the high point of their final operational capability, daring, fleeting stand that would be remembered internally as proof that, even in retreat, courage could make a difference. In broader terms, the ambush left a subtle but lasting impression on the Gulf War's historical record. It highlighted the interplay of technology and human factors in modern aerial combat, offering lessons on both sides about flexibility, morale, and the unpredictable nature of conflict. While the coalition retained undisputed air superiority, the engagement underscored that no system, however advanced, was infallible. Human decision-making, timing, and ingenuity could always challenge assumptions and create moments of tactical surprise. Ultimately, the January 30th encounter was both a tactical anomaly and a psychological milestone. For the Iraqis, it was a rare moment of agency in a war dominated by external forces. For the coalition, it served as a reminder that vigilance, adaptability, and respect for even minimal adversary capabilities were essential. The dogfight over Baghdad had not altered the course of the Gulf War, but it had reshaped perceptions, tested strategies, and immortalized the bravery and audacity of the pilots who faced one of the most lethal air forces in history and lived to tell the tale. Despite the brief duration of the January 30th engagement, it remains one of the most remarkable, yet largely overlooked air battles of the Gulf War. Mainstream narratives of Operation Desert Storm often highlight overwhelming coalition dominance, the precision bombing campaigns, and the rapid liberation of Kuwait. In those accounts, the valiant but fleeting stand of the Iraqi MiG-25s is barely mentioned, if at all a forgotten confrontation that nonetheless offers critical insights into modern air combat. In many ways, the obscurity of this engagement was deliberate. Coalition leaders understood that publicizing the episode could elevate the perceived competence of Iraq's Air Force, undermining the narrative of technological supremacy that framed the Gulf War. Yet for military analysts, the encounter provided a treasure trove of lessons. It showcased how even a handful of aircraft, piloted with courage and tactical foresight, could challenge a vastly superior opponent, disrupt operations, and expose vulnerabilities in sophisticated systems. The ambush also highlighted the psychological dimension of aerial warfare. Coalition pilots, confident in their F-15 Eagles and radar-guided missiles, faced a momentary but real threat that forced them into split-second defensive maneuvers. Iraqi pilots, aware of the risks, relied on meticulous planning and audacious tactics to exploit every possible advantage. This interplay of fear, skill, And decision-making is what gives the encounter its enduring significance. It was not merely a contest of machines, but of human ingenuity under extreme pressure. Historians and aviation enthusiasts have since dissected the battle, praising the MiG-25's utilization of speed, altitude, and timing, while acknowledging the Eagle's technological superiority and the crucial role of human adaptability in survival. It became an illustrative case study. In high-tech conflicts, even a small window of opportunity can allow underdog forces to achieve unexpected tactical results. The ambush reminds us that no engagement is ever entirely predictable, and that even brief clashes can leave a lasting imprint on doctrine and training. For Iraq, the engagement symbolized one of the last meaningful actions of a once formidable air force. The jets that survived the sortie would flee to Iran and never return, marking the effective end of Iraq's aerial capabilities. Yet for the pilots who flew that day, it was a rare moment of agency and pride, amid the inevitability of defeat, a fleeting victory in a war that would soon sweep through the region with unstoppable force. In retrospect, the forgotten air battle serves as a cautionary tale and a tribute. It illustrates the complexity of modern warfare, where technological advantages are significant but not absolute, and where human skill, daring, and tactical insight can momentarily challenge overwhelming odds. It is a story of bravery, calculation, and survival and engagement that, though largely omitted from mainstream accounts, continues to teach lessons about air combat, strategy, and the unpredictable nature of war. Even decades later, the pilot's actions over Baghdad remain a compelling reminder that in the skies, nothing is guaranteed. Fleeting moments of audacity can reverberate far beyond the immediate clash, leaving lessons for strategists, historians, and aviators alike. The MiG-25s may have vanished into obscurity, but their brief, audacious stand endures, a testament to human courage and the unpredictable theater of war. The January 30th ambush over Baghdad, though brief and largely unheralded, offers timeless lessons in the art of surprise and strategic thinking. In warfare, the unexpected often defines outcomes as much as raw firepower. The MiG-25 pilots, facing overwhelming odds, demonstrated that careful planning, audacity, and timing could disrupt even the most dominant forces. Their success, modest in scale but significant in principle, revealed the persistent power of human ingenuity in shaping the battlefield. Strategically, the ambush illustrated the necessity of anticipating the unconventional. Coalition forces, confident in technological dominance, were momentarily caught off guard, exposing gaps in aerial coverage and the vulnerabilities of missile systems. For military planners, it reinforced the importance of flexibility. No plan is infallible, and even highly controlled operations require contingency thinking. The MiG-25 sortie became a textbook example of asymmetric advantage where an apparently weaker force can leverage specific strengths to offset overall inferiority. Surprise, in this context, was both a tactical and psychological weapon. The Iraqi pilots did not rely solely on the capabilities of their aircraft. They relied on timing, positioning, and the calculated risks inherent in high-speed interception. By approaching from unexpected angles and exploiting moments when coalition aircraft were most vulnerable during refueling and patrol rotations, they transformed a potential rout into a momentary stalemate. It highlighted that in warfare, unpredictability can be as decisive as firepower, and that well-timed initiative can create opportunities against even superior opponents. For modern air combat doctrine, the implications were profound. The engagement underscored that training must go beyond technical mastery. Pilots must learn to anticipate unconventional tactics, adapt quickly under pressure, and understand their adversary's potential strategies. Technological superiority, while decisive in most scenarios, cannot replace human judgment, reflex, and creativity. The lessons from Baghdad would inform subsequent air campaigns, emphasizing integrated situational awareness, redundancy in missile and radar systems, and the need for constant vigilance against surprises even from apparently outdated platforms. The engagement also reinforced a broader strategic truth. The element of surprise can shift morale and perception as much as it affects tangible outcomes. For Iraq, the ambush was a fleeting morale boost, a demonstration that, under the right conditions, courage and precision could yield results. For coalition forces, it served as a humbling reminder that even in dominant positions, preparedness and adaptability remain crucial. The psychological dimension, confidence shaken, lessons learned, and operational adjustments made was as important as the physical outcomes of the dogfight. Ultimately, the forgotten aerial battle over Baghdad encapsulates enduring principles of warfare. Strategy, surprise, and human ingenuity are forces that no amount of technology can fully eliminate. The MiG-25 pilots may have vanished into the annals of history, but their audacious maneuver that day stands as a testament to the unpredictable nature of combat and the timeless importance of thinking beyond conventional expectations. It reminds commanders, pilots, and historians alike that in the chaos of war, preparation and daring can create moments where the improbable becomes possible. As the final echoes of jet engines faded over Baghdad, the January 30th engagement slowly receded into memory, a brief, intense flare in the broader storm of the Gulf War. Yet for those who witnessed it firsthand, and for the pilots who lived it, the event held enduring significance. It was a moment that crystallized the unpredictable interplay of courage, technology, and human decision-making in modern air warfare. In cinematic terms, the dogfight was a story of contrasts. The sleek, agile F-15 Eagles against the imposing, powerful MiG-25 Foxbats, advanced avionics versus raw speed, overwhelming numbers versus meticulous planning. Each frame, whether imagined or reconstructed in military analysis, tells of split-second decisions, heart-pounding maneuvers, and the razor-thin margins between survival and destruction. The pilot's perspectives, Awad and a samurai on one side, Dietz and Hemin on the other, remind us that the drama of combat unfolds in real time, with lives, morale, and reputations hanging in the balance. The surviving Iraqi jets that had fled to Iran would never return. Seized and absorbed by the Iranian military, they marked the symbolic end of Iraq's once formidable air force. For the coalition, the encounter was a fleeting jolt, a minor disruption in a campaign defined by rapid dominance and precision strikes. Yet the lessons endured. Even the most advanced systems have limits, and even the most beleaguered forces can seize fleeting opportunities to challenge superiority. The ambush over Baghdad also left an enduring legacy in military education and strategic thought. It became a case study in asymmetric tactics, illustrating how planning, timing, and audacity can amplify the impact of limited resources. Analysts have used it to explore the psychological dimension of aerial combat, the vulnerabilities of technological reliance, and the continuing relevance of human judgment in the cockpit. The battle, though rarely featured in mainstream accounts, is preserved in the annals of military aviation as a cautionary tale and a tribute to skill under pressure. More than 3 decades later, the event resonates as a reminder that history is not always defined by scale or duration. Sometimes, it is the intensity of a single encounter, the audacity of a few individuals, and the lessons learned in the heat of battle that leave the deepest imprint. The January 30th ambush was brief, almost ephemeral, yet it demonstrated the enduring principles of strategy, courage, and adaptability, the elements that shape not just wars but the stories we remember about them. In the end, the skies over Baghdad that day were a theater of courage, calculation, and fleeting triumph. For the pilots who faced the improbable, for the analysts who later reconstructed the engagement, and for all who study the evolution of aerial combat, it stands as a vivid chapter in the complex narrative of modern warfare. A story of bravery, survival, and lessons learned, as cinematic in scope, human at its core, and unforgettable in the subtle ways it reshaped perceptions of what was possible in the unforgiving expanse above the desert. While the skies over Baghdad fell silent, the echoes of January 30th would resonate far beyond that single day. The story of the MiG-25 ambush is not just a tale of machines and missiles, it is a window into the broader, often untold dramas of air warfare. For every high-profile strike and celebrated victory, there exist lesser-known engagements that shaped strategy, tested human skill, and revealed vulnerabilities in even the most advanced systems. Future stories will explore these hidden chapters. The aerial deceptions of Vietnam, where pilots like Colonel Robin Olds orchestrated maneuvers so daring they temporarily flipped the air war. The high-speed chases and standoff encounters in conflicts that spanned continents and decades, and the lessons learned by modern air forces in balancing technology with human decision-making. Each tale, like the MiG-25 ambush, demonstrates that the skies are never truly controlled. They are earned, moment by moment, by those bold enough to seize the opportunity. For viewers and enthusiasts, these stories offer more than historical insight. They reveal the human heart behind warfare. They explore courage, improvisation, and the fleeting triumphs that often go unrecorded in textbooks but leave a lasting impression on those who lived them. The MiG-25 engagement is just one thread in a vast tapestry of aerial history, a prelude to further explorations of conflict, strategy, and the remarkable individuals who dare to navigate the unforgiving skies. Stay tuned, because the next chapter in this journey will take you into the world of aerial brilliance, cunning ambushes, and tactical ingenuity that history often forgets but never truly loses. The skies have stories yet to be told, and the lessons they carry continue to shape the pilots and strategists of today.